creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, and beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and we're joined tonight by the full Wednesday Wham crew. Barb, the Empress of the Inks. Rob, the Paragon of Pencils. Aaron, the Contrarian Humphreys. The Wizards of Wordplay, Rory, and Scott are all with us tonight. And Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you had a good holiday.
Did that happen?
Yeah.
Did I miss it? When was that?
Yeah. It's kind of different now. You know, everything's different. 2023
feels different.
We finally had our Christmas on New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah,
yeah, because Dick and I had COVID, so we had to put it off. Yeah, so we finally kind of ran New Year's and Christmas in together there.
Yeah, I think everybody had a
ladder.
I think everybody had a white Christmas. Maybe Aaron. Aaron, did you get any kind of?
You had some crazy weather out there, right?
We had an ice storm for like one day.
Yeah.
But not really. I guess there was snow. It was freezing rain.
Mm-hmm.
That's worse than
snow.
Yeah,
that's when everybody's flying off the roads and everybody loses power.
Buffalo guys here.
Rory's down in Ohio, but he spent many years in Buffalo. He's familiar with the wild, woolly Western New York and Lake Erie and all its frozen glory and mountains and mountains and mountains of snow. And then 3 days later, it was 54 degrees and rainy. So
for a couple of years, I was like walking distance to the eastern shore of Lake Erie, and we would just get the most massive snow drifts.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
Yeah,
awesome.
There was a year the lake did this just like creeping slushy up the shores of Buffalo. It was just this roll it was like a walking pace, but it was like this foot high rolling sludge that was taking. It was awesome. Rory and I were on duty. We had to move cars. Cars were getting like consumed by Lake Erie. Yeah. Buffalo's awesome.
Great.
Wow, we have some. We have Buenos Aires from Dick. It sounds awesome. It was way too white of a Christmas for my liking, is what he says. And a lot of people got snowed in.
I'm in Wisconsin, so we did have a white Christmas.
Yeah.
Oh yes, guaranteed.
Very good. So tonight's subject is the good, the bad, and the gray. I wanted to take this podcast and talk about the post-millennial phenomena of the nature of the hero and the villain, and the sort of sophisticated upgrade of the interpretations of those archetypes in terms of how they're treated and written now, sometimes accurately or satisfactorily, sometimes not as much. But before we get started, I think maybe, agreeing on distinctions and definitions is probably the smart way to begin. So for the purposes of this discussion, I'd like us to consider heroes to be good. For those of you who play D&D, that would be lawful good, right? Like a paladin, right? So, and then
good.
Evil, right, would be, yes, the twirling of the mustache. This would be like not so much lawful.
Snidely whiplash.
Yes,
there
you go. Maybe the Red Skull, if you're going to go for a Marvel reference. And then the gray characters, which I guess one might characterize Wolverine, maybe.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And they're speaking of Wolvie, look at that.
Oh my.
Nice.
Yeah. Who drew that?
That's some.
Yeah, I wonder.
I don't even know. That's
probably some dork.
Yeah.
Some comic nerd.
It's a nerd pinup.
But Danny say nerd alert.
Nerd alert, absolutely. But that being said, let's get started with just what do you guys think of when you think of the hero in terms of the archetype from mythology? And I consider certainly comic books to be our modern era of mythology. So when we talk about the hero, to me, that's the character who is trying to maintain the virtuous side of the argument in the storyline in terms of, defending the innocent, saving whoever is in danger, protecting them, and destroying the threat. In this case, I would just, what comes to mind just off the top of my head would be somebody like Captain America. To me, quintessential hero.
And you guys already know that I've never been a Captain America fan.
Correct. which I can't wait to hear your take on hero in terms of first what you would consider the definition for you, and then I know you're a big Tony Stark fan, and I really want to hear, do you think he's a hero? You think he's closer to Gray? That's what this
He's
is all
gray.
about. Yeah.
Tony
Okay.
Stark is definitely gray.
Why do you say he's why he's gray?
So good Teen Beetle had bad.
Yeah.
The Green
So
Scorpion.
I get so
Gray
good
Switchblade.
equals Teen Beetle, bad equals the Green Scorpion.
Okay.
Gray
yes.
equals Switchblade. Yes, that's good.
Excellent.
That's keeping it Silverline
That's
relevant.
keeping it Silverline relevant,
Yeah.
relevant indeed. Comic
Oh.
Talk. Hey, Pops.
Whoa. Yeah.
Sorry. Yo.
Is there?
Uh,
There's a Kickstarter going on.
I think there is indeed.
Is
It's-
there is?
We should talk about that. Don't forget, Dean. That's your responsibility.
Oh, I'm gonna hand that right over to you, Scott, since you brought it up. So,
Would you like me to remind all of our
Well,
viewers
Scott,
out there?
this is a great
you know,
opportunity.
this
I'm
sounds
gonna
like
take
an
this
infomercial.
opportunity.
Let's go.
Tonight's show is brought to you by.
Seriously, you want to go there? Because
Yeah. So we
Go
don't
ahead.
forget, everybody out there, a reminder, the continuation of Barb's award-winning amazing story Divinity
Yes.
on Kickstarter right now. So if you've been waiting, if you've been wondering what happens with Divinity, this is your time to find out. And the conclusion of our intergalactic or planetary space battle for power, the Trump's story, based on decks of cards in the hands and who's going to come out on top. And that concludes in our Kickstarter campaign going on right now on Kickstarter. And the easiest way
Plot
to
twist. It's euchre.
What?
And then
In
the end,
You've been euchred.
You've been
That was a brilliant idea on Roland's part. Very original
It's very clever. And
very clever to take a deck of cards and turn it into a comic.
amazing art styles too for the people who appreciate the art. We got different styles. I know I say this a lot. Divinity has a very classic comic book style, which I really like. Fits the story. It's not a distraction. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, artist, Trump's has a bit of a more epic style. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot more cosmic sinewy
cosmic
bodies
energies.
and suits blasting and blowing up with things
Yes.
going this way and that way and huge spacescapes and so forth. So
And our own personal Brit is
yes,
doing that one.
he did. Peter Clinton did the
Our
art for
token
that,
Brit,
and so the whole point of this is to say, go to Kickstarter and look for Steam Patriots. Ooh, yeah, you can look for that.
Ooh, yeah,
Look
yeah,
for
them too.
Silverline.
Yeah, that too.
Wow.
Look for Silverline.
Freudian slip.
And
Brilliant.
all the links though are on all of our socials,
Yes.
Facebook and Instagram, and
The
even on
Silverline
LinkedIn.
Comics.
So
We'll be there.
go Silverline Comics on Kickstarter and go grab your copies right now. And as a reminder, if you didn't know, you are not speculating in this purchase. You are simply pre-ordering your comic book because they are ready to print. And at the conclusion, which I think is the 22nd of this month, the campaign ends. And in about a month's time, you have your comic book. That's the way we do it. So go grab your books.
Nice.
There. All right.
And very nice.
And back to our regularly
Yeah,
scheduled
back to the
programming.
studio.
program. Welcome back.
That's enough to you, Dean.
Thank you. Welcome back
Out in the
to
field.
Wednesday Whams, the good, the bad, and the gray. So anyway, back to Barb. You were presenting us with why is Tony Stark considered gray in your opinion? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Because he's human.
So he's less of an icon and more portrayed more as a human being with flaws.
Right, exactly. I mean, let's face it, we all are flawed.
Sure, absolutely.
And I have a hard time relating
Okay.
to somebody like Captain America because he comes across to me as very pretentious and self-righteous.
Okay. Fair enough.
And
It's just confidence.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oozing
and-
confidence.
I could see you get that way, but I'm with Rory.
I
think
could
it's
see
confidence.
with good storytelling,
Okay.
good character development.
Yes.
Barb can see the hero and be turned off by that. But I would say if a good writer is writing Captain America,
Mhm.
he could likewise have you feel that feeling, but also understand his motivation for it and understand him. So and we've talked about this a lot with like the development of characters going from 2-dimensional to more 3-dimensional. You see him as being pretentious, but I would really, with lack of a better way to say it, once you get to know him, which is what the comic book should do, and they don't always do it. They don't always.
You want your heroes to be heroic.
Yes. So in the writing, it ebbs and flows with the quality of his character. The movies, I think, did a great job because they contrasted him with Tony Stark.
Right. And I, in the movies, I still got that feeling because he was always, Tony Stark, you're wrong, I'm right. The safest hands are our own. Otherwise, the safest hands are mine. And I know a lot of people have arguments about that, but the reason I like Tony Stark better is because he is flawed, but he wants to be good. He has to overcome his own demons in order to do good. So he's choosing. He could have so easily been a villain, you know, but he has to fight to overcome his baser nature to be a good person. And for me, that is more admirable than somebody that's just, I'm perfect.
Sure. We're having a great discussion. Welcome, Roberta. We appreciate you joining us tonight. The title of our show tonight is The Good, the Bad, and the Gray, and we are in the midst of discussing the archetypal heroes, villains, and the more nuanced gray characters.
So is it not a sustainable character like Captain America? Because Marvel was really one of the bigger. They were the ones that brought in all the flawed characters. In the comics, as they became more mainstream.
He's just misunderstood.
Is it hard to maintain a character like Captain America, or let's say put it in the fantasy world, a paladin, and as a singular character? Do they require someone to point out that they need to either lighten up, or do they need to have somebody to? What's that?
Get the stick out of your ass?
Yeah, or to explain. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if they have an opportunity to explain themselves, that's really why I thought the movies, right up till about Endgame, and I have there's those last two Avengers movies, they're fun. I loved the first Avengers movie. I saw 4 times in the theater. I'm no John Medic who's seen Star Wars 3,800 times.
Wow!
He takes notes.
Every day. But love those movies because I loved how Iron Man and Captain America as the main characters.
Hello.
Good.
As the main characters.
It's a friend calling me. I'm going to let it go to voicemail.
Okay, no worries.
They played off each other, and Captain America was Captain America, Iron Man was Iron Man, and they both, I feel like they both grew together.
Yes,
and
I liked Avengers because Tony Stark proved that he would lay down on the wire and let everybody crawl over him, and Captain America pulled that stick out of it.
Yeah.
So well, I think there are 2 things that were brought to mind through your dialogue there, and one is Scott rambles. Just kidding. One is that you did identify part of why it used to work and doesn't work as well now is the culture itself has evolved and matured past the time period in which these characters were initially conceived. And that's not to say that the idea of the virtuous icon has been abandoned or corrupted, although it somewhat has, but the presentation of such a character has to evolve with the culture that sustains it, correct? So I would say that for Barb, and she's made some great points there, is that you have to now write a virtuous character that represents it in a more broad brush iconographic method.
These are not black and white.
You have to represent him in a more nuanced fashion than you would have 50 years ago, certainly 75 years ago. So that being said, I think
the ideology 50 years ago was so much different than the ideology right now. We are, I think, we're more jaded, we're more cynical, but we are also more realistic.
Yes, you remember born at the time of World War II, where the broad brush concept was certainly more accepted in the pop culture and the sort of pulp culture,
Good
so to
versus evil.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about Saturday Evening Post. The cartoons in the circulated newspapers were things like Prince Valiant, right? Flash Gordon. So fantasy was extremely broad brush. The concept of a good guy and a bad guy was certainly more juvenile than it is today. So we've grown in that sense. Some might say we've devolved in the sense of we've almost clouded over the core of the virtues, which really, if you look at Cap, he's really a Boy Scout. And the core of the Boy Scout idea was literally just to try to always do the right thing as you saw it, defend the innocent, destroy evil,
Arthurian, knightly.
Yeah, sort of a knightly thing. And so, again, a good writer can certainly bring out a nuanced version of Cap. Roberta, since you're just joined us here, I want to get another woman's viewpoint about what are your thoughts on what's been said. I'll go ahead and throw out there. You can cover it with Cap, or you can pick another sort of Superman type of archetype and tell us what your thoughts are on that. Do they connect with you in the traditional way, or do they need to be nuanced, and why?
I do think they need to be nuanced because, as you pointed out, the actual culture shift has been so different, to the point that, even just in my lifestyle, I noticed that children of the age I was when I saw the Superman movie, for instance, very, very different. They're more jaded. It takes a lot more effort for the villains to impact them. Less innocent. Yeah, much more worldly.
Right. Yes.
But much less interested in sweet ideas. And, I think
beauty.
It's more of a turnoff than attraction point.
Interesting. I think you make a great point there. We have a comment.
I like the struggle.
From Calculus. Steve Ditko always had his objectivist viewpoint in early Marvel, keeping the gray area out. Again, yes, that's correct. Because in that era, again, the culture was just starting to grow and do some self-examination, and they were coming out of the 50s into the 60s. So we had defeated, the mid-20th century evil of fascism, and we're coming out of that into the sort of golden age of our economic growth. And so everybody was having kids and getting families started. And then, so we had time to, for lack of a better phrase, navel gaze a bit and figure, what's life all about? Why are we here? What is the meaning of all this? When nobody's trying to burn your place down, you have time to navel gaze and become more philosophical about
I know that I am certainly not perfect. I have a lot of issues, including a lot of anger.
Correct.
And
I yelled at me.
Well, fake it.
The year
no,
is young.
I've mellowed I've mellowed quite a bit in my old age, but I feel that when I can connect better to a hero like Deadpool or Red Hood or somebody like that, who has got to confront their own demons in order to do good, It becomes a mission to prove to themselves that they aren't a total waste of space.
So if you're saying if the creative team that was assigned to the traditional hero character was sophisticated enough to paint the picture of the hero as a struggling individual, more so than just the perfect icon, it would be compelling to you, correct? If, for example, if someone explored Cap's childhood more, where he was just a geek and a nerd and he was beat up by all the bigger guys, and we got a little bit more into the psychology of Steve Rogers before the serum, he just really wanted to be like all of his heroes as a kid. He wanted to go fight the Nazis and save the world, and he was just a skinny kid who wasn't good enough, and he wasn't big enough, and he wasn't tough enough, and he was made fun of.
He always had the heart. Yeah. He always had the heart. Never stopped, right?
Heart.
But the fact he had that heart is the biggest difference between him being a hero in the future and not. because the average person would tend to be a little vindictive if they got the chance.
Good point. Good point. He
And
he
Cap and
didn't
Spidey
use
are very
this. He
on
didn't
point.
use the serum to quote get back at his tormentors.
Right.
He
Right.
used it for a more noble.
He's more the selfless character, whereas you could argue Tony Stark needed something to push him to be a hero, which is fine.
That's
But-
fine. Just different character.
Right.
That's a change of heart story.
Right.
Yeah,
I like the Paladin.
Well, his is a redemption arc.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Lawful good. I like the lawful good character. But I agree with you, Barb. They can't just be two-dimensional. They have to have a reason, and the reader, the viewer, has to see the struggle.
If
If
I
they're
were
good all the time, meaning like
Mhm.
the public, the front they put up in battle or whatever.
Yeah.
We
It would get
also
dull.
see behind the curtain. We've
Yeah.
got to see that when it's all over, that they're still a person, and that's what has to happen if you're going to have that Boy Scout Paladin character.
If I were going to
Yeah.
write Captain America, I would write him from the perspective of because of the way that he was raised, his childhood was so rough. I mean, you never get over your childhood traumas. Never.
No.
I don't care how old
Nope.
you are.
Nope.
That he's always got to prove to himself and others that he's good enough.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I would write him. That would make him more interesting than just automatically being the good man.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
he's
Yeah.
always
Have we
on a
put-
mission to prove to himself and others that he deserves the serum. That he
earned that title.
yeah, that he deserved to be chosen out of everybody else, and he's never going to forget that he's got this great responsibility, and that he isn't a waste of space. He isn't this weak person, and it's always going to be a psychological thing with him that he's got to prove himself.
I'm curious, Barb, before we move on to the villains, what how do you feel about Spidey? Because Peter Parker to me is very similar to Steve, just kind of a younger version. How do you feel when you read Parker? Do you feel the same sort of this guy's too goody-goody, he's boring, or do you feel more of the struggle with
No,
Pete?
because he's got a great sense of humor, and I think that Steve Rogers is kind of humorless to me.
Okay.
But not only does he have a great sense of humor, he has no problem making fun of himself or
Yeah.
anything around him. He'll parody himself and stuff like that. But he's also young,
Yes.
and the young people are idealistic.
Yeah. It's more
So,
playful. He's more
yeah.
playful
He
character.
hasn't got the life beat out of him yet.
Yeah. He hasn't seen people die around him for, in
Well,
horrible
he
ways.
saw he saw his Uncle Ben die, which
That's
was
true,
his
but I'm saying-
traumatic incident.
Yeah. I'm saying in a soldier's
But he didn't become a Batman.
like
But yeah, but thank you. Or what about a Batman? He's a humorless, boring. He can be, and
we're
without
gonna get there with the gray.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna
He's the
try-
most boring playboy.
he does fit it. If he could put him in the Paladin category.
Well, I wouldn't, but that's a
Gray
good
vote
discussion
Paladin.
to have too. I wouldn't put and he's my favorite
Yeah,
character, but I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
I wouldn't put him as a paladin. I think he's more of a ninja in terms of whatever
Okay.
works.
Right.
He'll
He,
do.
he sticks
Right.
he sticks to a code. He sticks
Yeah,
to
it's
a
a
code.
code.
And also, I do. He can be, if you want to talk about the personality of him,
Mhm.
he can be a one-track boring.
Oh yeah,
like
like
Cap.
Mhm.
he's like the
um,
Terminator. Sometimes.
Yeah, just
He's
yeah.
definitely
If
awesome.
he's written that way,
Right.
if he's written with like fights his attraction to Catwoman because she's
free.
she's a bad girl, but he's trying to be a good guy, but he can't help
Miss
it.
Miss
He's just-
Kitka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge to write him because what you have to do is you have to write Bruce Wayne and Batman.
Mhm.
To understand the broken person for him. He's a completely broken person. So Batman is the real person, and then Bruce Wayne is a mask. Because you're echoing Zorro.
He's
Um,
kind of inflexible.
Yeah, kind of inflexible and kind of humorless. That's the flaw I've always seen in the character is there's very little humor in Batman's world, and
Well,
you know, like,
since the '60s.
yeah, right, right.
If
we're talking,
if
yeah,
you look at the,
Yeah.
the late '40s and '50s version of Batman,
Yep.
there was
Yeah,
some
that's a
humor
little more
there.
playful.
Yeah.
Calculus says he's not quite a rogue, but not quite a paladin either.
Yeah,
I
he's
agree.
multi-classing
Yeah.
for sure.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
He's
gray
not your
character.
Sir Lancelot, that's for sure.
No, certainly not. Before we move on, though, Aaron, did you want to chime in on hero
Yes,
before
please.
we move to villain? Because I wanted to move to
Like
villain.
this sort of like the archetypical like Superman
Mhm.
hero, whatever. I just they don't really do anything for me.
Mhm.
But I just always see them as more of a reflection to talk about society at large. So
Okay.
if you do a character that is a gray area, you're usually in a story doing a character study. If you do something that somebody is virtuous and portraying those virtues, you're usually talking about either your own personal virtues or those virtues, or you're reflecting the virtues that you think should be exhibited in the world.
Mhm.
And so I think it's two different ways of storytelling.
Sure.
Like even though Luke Skywalker, when he's doing the hero's growth, he's maturing into what we consider the good citizen, the
Correct.
responsible citizen. Is it interesting? I don't know. Most people aren't like that. But again, Star Wars is more about good versus evil than about the character study in and of itself. That's why it never interested me, because Luke Skywalker is pretty one note. Darth Vader's more nuanced than him. But a lot of that stuff is very one note. Now, you can take one note characters and do interesting things. That's why I'm like such a fan of Judge Dredd and
Mhm.
Conan, because they are one note
Mhm.
characters, but not in the way that you see them, not good or evil. They stand for certain sensibilities that reflect in society. Conan, the natural state of man is a savage, wild,
Mhm.
which Robert E. Howard had a huge debate with Lovecraft, Howard E.
Mm.
Lovecraft, about that, which he wrote numerous letters back and forth.
Right.
Judge Dredd was a comedic parody of the American hero, like Superman or whatever.
Mhm.
He was a British way of making fun of us. The idea of you are so upending, but you just uphold the law. And so those characters are fun, I think, to put them in awkward situations like Judge Dredd and see how they react.
Mhm.
That was a
There's
fun
no
book to work
evolution
on, by
with
the way.
Judge Dredd, but that's the point.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
good.
he was, and that's why they study him on in reference to like a dystopian society or something, is because he was more the character. If you had an absolute authoritarian fascist society, Judge Dredd would
Mhm.
be the sort of cop, and so they study him in that light. But it was never about the character. So I just think it depends on what kind of stories you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
And I think those
Good point.
characters go work into those stories depending on what you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
right. So I think
setting an environment, it really play a big role. What you're saying in
right.
how-
So the one note
Yeah.
characters more for examining the world, and character studies are more examining the human condition. And that's how I've always seen it.
That's good observation.
That's a
Rob,
good observation. Very.
It
Yeah,
is.
very-
I like it.
very deep. Rob, talk to us, man. The hero and what makes him interesting to you. What are your thoughts?
Wow. You called on me earlier than I expected.
He's in the middle of working.
You just say, what Aaron said.
What?
Yeah, what Aaron
He
said.
stole
No.
what he stole.
He stole everything,
No,
man.
I don't give it a whole lot of thought. I mean, they're stand-ins for us in our different aspects.
Okay.
And the hero, I don't expect them to be like I don't expect them to be as flawed as we are.
Yeah.
I want
Okay.
my heroes to be a lot less flawed. I want them to,
Interesting.
Batman is right on the edge of being outside my
Comfort
feeling
zone?
of what a hero is.
Yeah.
He's right on the edge. At least the
Edge.
Batman that's out there now. I think Batman could be. I think he needs to be more of a detective. Really, I think
Yeah.
he needs a good writer who will write him as a detective who discovers things that way. but resorts to violence and beating the confession out of somebody, leaves that as a last resort. Because his whole reaction to his parents' death, it should be away from violence, shouldn't it? I mean, in the original comic book version, he actually carried a gun, which always surprised me. If his parents were killed with a gun,
if that were true, then children of abusers would never become abusive, but they do.
I mean, it depends on what your psyche is. Yeah, how are you affected?
Yeah. I want my heroes to be the opposite of, or not the opposite, but better than we are.
Well, and also, if he was such a master martial artist, there wouldn't be many fights, because he would usually be subduing his opponents within 1 or 2 moves.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he would be doing it very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot. There
wouldn't be much of a fight scene to draw in the comic that way.
Yeah. There's a lot of boring fight scenes. Right. There's a lot of conceit there, Aaron, because you and I both know people like to see more
the kung fu action,
Hong Kong wire fu.
I know kung fu.
Then they do aikido, which would take 3 seconds, and the guy's on the ground.
Right, boring. And that's how. I mean, it'd be interesting to ever see a movie where they actually did that with Batman.
Yeah,
because I mean, he would be taking these guys out very quickly.
It would be more like kung fu.
Exactly.
Well,
he wouldn't even be landing many punches. It would be mostly using the momentum and throwing them off.
He'd be defending himself and then putting the guy down.
Exactly.
It'd be jujitsu or aikido.
That's my major beef with every fight scene in a movie, where the bad guy just throws the other guy around. Like, just shoot him. You have a gun.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me throw you against a car. Let me throw you against a wall. Let me throw you across the room. Like,
why that scene in Indiana Jones where the guys are whirled with swords threatening him, and he finally just goes, pulls out his gun and shoots him. That's more. That was actually more real. Definitely.
It was for a good action fantasy. That was a realistic scene. Rory, I want to get to you before we move to villains as well. What the hero to you? Would you like them more idealistic and more mythical, or more down to earth, or does it depend, like Aaron says, on what type of story you're trying to tell at the time?
I think it depends on what type of story you're trying to tell. I mean, what kind of character arc are you looking to have for your character? There's always that line where you live long enough, you become the bad guy, kind of thing. I'd like to see a story arc where it's a good guy and a bad guy, but it goes on so long, the bad guy becomes a good guy.
Yeah.
That's kind of
interesting.
That's kind of what my Goblins was about.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you read my stuff, that's what happened to him.
The best ever.
The idea was that that the protagonist in the story is the one who's getting revenge against. That the bad guy is getting revenge on the protagonist, but for very good reason. And when you see the reason why, you're like, well, okay, I can kind of agree why this guy's doing this, even though he is the bad guy. Is he?
Yeah.
And that has to do a little bit with revenge. But because I've already seen the protagonist getting revenge on the antagonist, and I thought, well, what happened if you flip that around? What if somebody made a mistake?
Everybody thinks that they are the hero in their own story.
Right.
Yeah.
Every bad guy thinks he's doing something for a good reason.
We'll get to that here shortly.
Yeah, right. Because that's the whole nature of evil. Like, you think you're doing something for a good reason, but you're going to have bad outcomes and consequences. Yeah. And I'd also I know we've talked about it before, but all the Jungian archetypes, I'd like to plot. I know they do it for personality types for comic book heroes, but for the 12 or 10 archetypes, who is everybody? Providing structure and control and a ruler. I see that as Batman.
Okay.
The sage knowledge would be like Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual journey.
Okay.
Innocent safety spiritual journey could probably be like Robin, because that character has gone so far and arced in different ways, as through different characters. You've had a very complete storyline through all the Robins. So I'd love to see a chart of that.
Well, what Vic is talking about the improv.
Indiana Jones scene. He explained it.
He was sick.
Yeah. It was improv. He was supposed to have this huge fight with them, and he was tired, so he was tired.
But still, it's an iconic.
Yeah, they're going to do a riff on that. They're going to do a riff on that in the new movie.
Great.
Oh,
only it's going to be flipped.
Yeah.
gosh, I don't know. I don't know if I can stomach that one. That's a whole podcast.
That's when
on its own.
Indiana shuffles away and
Oh boy, that really hurts just to think about. Well, let's move on a little bit to villains now, because Rory, you touched on something very important, and that is to the villain, he is doing the right thing or the self-serving thing, but
he knows he's doing the wrong thing, but he doesn't care.
He doesn't care
what he wants.
I would say there's a difference between the mentality of, well, you got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet versus no, this is for the greater good.
Sure.
And I don't care if anybody else understands.
The Magnetos of the world compared to the Jokers of the world.
Yeah,
I mean, like Joker knows he's bad.
Rory and Scott know this.
Chaos for the sake of chaos. I mean, Dean got me hooked on this one, this deadly duo.
Oh yeah.
And Magneto was doing it because
the world would thank him after he killed all the Jews.
Yeah.
So he was a good guy even in his eyes.
Yeah.
Which that was Magneto.
Right. Magneto is an interesting.
Well, it's down to relativism.
Yeah. Dilemma, because he really thinks that, he's right. It doesn't matter that he's actually repeating the mistakes of his own oppressors and captors. He doesn't care. It's like, no, but I'm right. They were wrong. I'm actually right.
Well, I just think he was
myopic view of that.
Yeah, and I think he always just was willing to be the martyr. He was just convinced that the humans would turn on them. That was inevitable, and that he would be the martyr to save the mutant race.
You know who else borrowed that? Aaron is Alan Moore borrowed that with the character of Adrian Veidt in The Watchmen, right? He's basically like, look, I know how this is going to turn out, so I'm going to do a lot of bad things just to save the world.
Right.
The martyr is just a flip on the other side of the coin to a terrorist.
The one thing is, for how smarter, I guess, writer Alan Moore is, I never thought he thought, and how smart Amadeus was supposed to be. That was his name, right? Amadeus in the book. What was the guy's name? The bad guy? It wasn't.
Adrian Veidt's name was. Oh gosh, what was that character's name?
Ozymandias.
Ozymandias. Yeah. That he never thought through the initial consequence, because I was thinking like, well, now humanity has a new villain to fight these aliens, and I'm like, yeah, for like a year or two, but when the aliens don't show up in a year or two, they're gonna go back to fighting each other. So, and I was surprised that Ozymandias never thought that through and tried to develop more of a permanent solution than this sort of stopgap at best. And so I felt like, well, he's so smart, but this is huge flaw in his plan. That if you don't continuously attack humans with the aliens, they're just going to be like, oh, well, I guess they're not coming back. That's just, So it just kind of ruined the whole story. I'm like, well, this guy's an idiot. Like how, even the Thanos in the movies when he did like, well, if I kill half the humans, they will use up all the resources. Yeah, but they'll just reproduce again to get back to the same. So it was
it was even stupider. It was even stupider than that. He didn't just kill half of sentient life. He killed half of all life.
Yeah,
cows, the bunnies.
Yeah. That's even
sheep.
Yeah. Did you hear the idea that if you kill half of your gut bacteria, how sick everybody would have been for a while?
Yeah.
Wow. Talk about Scott going granular. Wow.
Nerd alert.
But it was still just a weird, like these smart, and like even with Alan Moore, and I'm like, well, he didn't even think that. Did Alan even see this flaw, or was it supposed to be that this guy was really this smart guy who was really a moron?
You know,
it? Like,
so smart. He was
I think there was a lot of drugs involved in that.
Probably, yeah.
And I think Alan was way in another place when he wrote that.
He is.
Thanos' reason was if he kills off half of all life, there will be more resources to go around. No, you're killing half the resources.
Double the resources.
Considering if you're talking about any predatory animal, it's like you just took away half of its food source.
Yeah,
because it's just
So what villain? Sorry, I don't want to get too far off. But what villains come up with a perfect plan?
Strangely enough, when they did the Watchmen movie, and this was like a perfect plan when he framed Dr. Manhattan as a villain, and then it's supposed to be God's always watching him. Like, well, that made sense. They would never go out, like humans never walk out of line because he's always watching you, and they know he's real because they've seen him. So I'm like, well, that makes much more sense than the giant psychic alien thing, whatever.
Sure.
I never understood
Still wouldn't stop people.
Villain plans to just destroy
everything,
all the resources, like Sauron. Like it's only you can be
the guys
angry,
in Captain Planet,
and you can wreak havoc. But then you're gonna be like, wake up from this drunken bender and be like, "What the crap did I just?"
Where
is everybody? Where are all the trees?
Yeah.
Now I get to live in a wasteland. I don't understand.
I never got the whole idea of villains wanting to overtake the world, anyways, because doesn't that just seem like more work?
Right?
Like, is it a masochist thing that you just want to be able to tell everyone what to do?
I have a hard enough time just planning my own day.
I know,
right? But he wants to overtake the world, and it's like so he can have the magical, pretty seat, the throne. I never really got because they never talked about. You never heard like a villain go like, "Well, I want to overtake the world." And here's my 10-year plan when I'm in power. You never hear that. You never hear his pitch why he should be elected president.
No, absolutely
it's going to overtake the world, and
then who knows?
What?
Right?
Like I don't know.
You get what? I like the get rich villains. That's fine. I get that. Like,
that makes
I'm
sense.
going to commit this big crime to get lots of money. The Auric Goldfinger. I'm going to ruin the U.S. reserves of gold. So
so I can run the world.
Right. Okay.
I understand that. Greed is a motivator.
But
I just always thought these super villains were just sexually frustrated and they just weren't getting any. So if they overtook the world, they could get all they want.
Oh, we went there.
I know where you're coming from.
I mean, well, think about it. Because with money, I mean, why does he want money? So he can get
because the companion of the Freudian approach is Adlerian, right? Adler believed it was about power. Not about sexual frustration. So the power aspect of it, right?
Well,
if you've got everything you want, the next stage is, well, now I get to tell everybody else what to do, right? Because you're the master of your own. Then you gotta run other people.
And let's think of how many of these villains are Dr. Fill in the blank.
Yes,
evil.
They peaked in their academic career,
right?
What?
Right?
They just.
Listen, I didn't go through 8 years of evil medical school to be called Mr. Evil.
Yeah, right.
Well, it was funny because I've always noticed that when they have the female villains who want to overtake the world, they want to overtake they don't usually want to overtake the world. They want to destroy the world for revenge, or they slighted him. Like I don't see many female supervillains want to overtake the world and rule it. Now maybe they have, but it seems like they're more into ultimate destruction. When men were like, well, I mean, I just want to buy stuff.
Infrafan says so we should have elections in brothels for supervillains instead of having dudes in mask clothes.
Punch them.
There you go. There's an idea. So I want to get Roberta. I want to get your take on the difference between the villain archetypes, like the Joker, versus the mastermind, like Magneto. Like, which one connects with you and why, or which one is scarier and why? Just curious.
I think the Joker is scarier.
Yeah.
Because it adds the element of you don't know his motives truly.
Unpredictable.
Yeah. And seems to be capable of almost anything in persuasion, if not in deed. So it's not just powers,
Yeah.
Because Magneto, he has a plan, he has his reasons. There is some kind of a creed he lives by. So I have a little bit more of a, I'd be afraid of his powers, obviously, but you get to the point where you're like, this person makes sense.
Yeah.
It may not be easy to swallow, but at least, Joker does not. It makes sense.
I think part of what you're leading toward here is the fear of the unknown, in terms of if you have a mastermind like a Magneto or a Red Skull or even a Doctor Doom, you can figure out their motives and perhaps find a way to foil what they want to do. Where with the Joker, where you have a complete chaotic evil character there, I am bringing D&D in. We have complete chaotic evil, anarchy. How do you work against that? Because
that is the element that's the scariest.
It's opaque.
Like
their agenda.
I felt like that.
Yeah.
I felt like that with
Yeah.
Jean Grey and
Or
her
Terminus.
powers. You know,
Yes.
having the inability to control it, had to deal with it within herself, and ultimate destruction was if she gave in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's scary. That's absolutely
that is scary. Calculus says Magneto is trying to take care of his people, which I can
Yeah,
understand.
he's one of that gives him a depth, that element of being relatable or redeemable in some fashion.
Well, I
can see that.
Yeah, more flawed. I mean, most people. I mean, the Joker to me was almost why people are fascinated with serial killers, because they can't understand the mental logic or gymnastics that go. I mean, when you watch like Jeffrey Dahmer, you can't begin to understand why he. I mean, on a psychological level, you can kind of understand maybe, but you can't put yourself in the mindset to go that. With Magneto, you completely could put yourself in that mindset.
Yeah.
So you see, it's a little more relatable, but and, you know, and also just one other thing to reinforce that the bad guys are using it to get constantly frustrated. I have noticed that every time they show the villains in the thrones, the girl, he has like half naked girls surrounding his feet. That is the number one. But you never see queens with half naked guys surrounding the thrones.
Sure.
Why doesn't it go the opposite way?
Oh yeah, you do.
Yeah, you go to read some Conan where you get to the evil queen's lair, and there's all.
And then you got like all the guys. Okay, yeah. Because I always see the ones, and I'm always just like, so.
Infrafran says, does anyone find that some villains become more relatable once you drop them in a different time? Like if I was being persecuted because of my genes, a dude on a meteor promising my safety sounds good. Yeah, context. You're talking about context. Calculus. And that often defines the villainy or nuances it a bit. Rory, talk to us. Villainy. What makes it? What makes a character a villain? And then again, let's go deeper. What makes a scarier villain in your mind?
Oh man, I think like Joker chaos for the sake of chaos, unpredictability is probably it's up there. I have a hard dividing line between institutionalized evil, like Scott was saying, Negan.
Hey, don't. I want to talk about Negan. So give me.
Okay, yeah. Talk about Terminus. The part of Walking Dead where they're at Terminal, whatever it's called. And spoiler alert, it's been out for a few years. Where they have all their victims like bent over a trough, and there's like baseball batting to the back of the head, and they interrupt them like, "Excuse me, how many rounds did you shoot?" And they're like just taking notes. Like that is like extreme order. That is just unemotional. We're just doing business here, and that's a scary part of evil too.
That's the Nazis. That's
Happy New Year, Tommy.
Hi, Tommy. Paperwork on all the people they killed.
I
mean, details.
It's data collection.
Wow.
You know? And then we'll crunch the numbers later.
Yeah, the cold calculation. And Rory, I don't want to take over.
No, go for it.
Yeah, that idea too, like with the Nazis or that whatever cult-like mentality where you get everybody to march in lockstep and do your bidding, and they turn off that human side of their brain. But like Negan, at least I've not read the comics. I'm sorry, everybody. I have not seen the last I think 2 or 3 seasons of the show. I love and likewise dislike the show. But Negan in the show is one of those villains where if you step out of line, like, and he's not omnipresent, he's not omniscient.
Right,
but he's got his people everywhere.
He's got hive mentality.
Yes, and when he reports in, he shows up unannounced, inspections,
right?
And you've got a
controlled chaos.
Yeah, which Rory, think about boot camp. If anybody's been through basic training,
my gosh,
there's a level of terror because if you think, oh, nobody's looking, I can do the thing I'm not supposed to. They could be there. Someone's standing right there behind you. The all-seeing eye is right there to rain down destruction on you, and that's an unsettling feeling to have. If you mess up, which what Negan was just a reign of terror. And Joker's kind of the same thing. Like he's this unpredictable reign of terror, and a step ahead too. The heroes, and that's a story. That's a story.
And it's like a game for him.
Yeah.
Like he feeds off the game, not the end.
It's a plot device I enjoy, and I've talked about this a lot. I like that. I liked when the hero loses and loses and loses and loses. I like that like against everything
that
against
can
the hero.
go wrong.
Yeah. I enjoy.
We're just gonna write a comic about Murphy's Law, and
if it can go wrong, it will.
Well, that is a traditional approach to defining the hero. Is really stripping down the hero to his core before bringing him back. You know, it's the Rocky.
And that's like the old mythos, all the Greek myths.
Yeah, the Greek myths.
Pretty much
right.
Yeah, they lose.
And you can have
a
decades-long odyssey before coming back.
Oh yeah, and stay on that island, right, of the Lotus Eaters, hang out. Interesting that reference comes. I mean, back with our modern storytelling with the Cage. The very first Star Trek pilot is actually taking Greek mythology, because basically it's like a cage is still a cage, even if they're giving you everything you want.
Yep. Right.
Good metaphor there. Good metaphor. Infrafan says the scariest villains to me are the ones who can do exactly what they promise and are seemingly unstoppable. And then he says to go back to Veidt when Watchmen saying "I did it 35 minutes ago" is one of the great villain lines. Yeah, it is kind of chilling there.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Yeah, great line.
Excellent. So, as far as villains go, I think we've nailed it in terms of unpredictability is ultimately more terrifying. Mastermind with the grand plan is a little bit more palatable because, one, relatable, and two, you can undo the plan if you can start to solve the Rubik's Cube, solve the puzzle a little bit. So Batman does, and that brings us to the gray. I consider Batman more gray because he'll do, quote, whatever it takes without crossing the no-kill line. I mean, I know the modern
he has self-control.
version. Yeah. Even though if you really want to get granular with it, which I loathe to do that, but if you do, you know, how many people are going to die if he's like flying around in his jet, you know, bat jet, you know, firing indiscriminately into the city. You know, so people are going to die, man. You know, the Batmobile has got machine
acceptable
guns on.
numbers.
What do they magically miss all the innocent people? I mean, come on.
Well, I always thought it was funny that, again, it's the comic books. No one's supposed to seek it, you know. Figure out a super villain, but you would think you'd figure something a little odd if somebody's ordering jet fuel to their mansion.
Yeah.
Like you think that would be like exactly.
That's a sign.
What? You know, unless he owns his own airport and then goes there and then takes it to his mansion.
Yeah.
But it just
Alfred wears many hats.
Yeah.
Well, even in the Christopher Nolan movie, we ordered all of these bat masks, and he ordered like 10,000 or so. You know, it was not him. But you can just imagine some guy who works in that company is going to be like, that mask is really familiar. Didn't some
one guy did
order a ton
that,
of these?
If you'll recall, in one of the movies, the guy did figure it out.
Yeah.
Remember?
Which made sense. Which actually made sense. And I never quite understand. You can figure out who somebody is from their mouth. I mean, most people, if you cover up, you can figure out. So it's a conceit of comics, I guess. But
I like
of course it is.
The best Batman movie, Lego Batman, when Joker says Bruce Wayne is Batman's roommate.
I love it. Oh, I love that. That's great. What other gray character? We mentioned Wolverine. What
Punisher,
Daredevil,
Black Adam.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Black Adam for sure.
Yeah.
Talk to us about either one of those. Barb, get your take on the gray characters and why so compelling. I know the relatability factor. Is it a redemption arc potential also? Is that
sort of? I really was not that familiar with Black Adam until I saw the movie, and I thought it was the way they presented him, and it turned out, I don't know if everybody's seen the movie or not, but
I just saw it.
His backstory made it all make sense.
Give us a quick TV guide backstory. What's the backstory?
He's not the original Black Adam.
Okay. All right.
And he took on the mantle for tragic reasons. and he's very bitter and angry. And you can see, you can see why he has no regard for life. And even in the end, after everything's wrapped up, he says, "Okay, I will behave as long as you don't come in and step foot into my country. These are my people.
Okay.
I will leave you alone if you leave me alone."
Mm-hmm.
And then he's not going to stop taking lives if certain conditions are met.
That sounds a lot like Victor Von Doom to me.
Yeah. Well, Latveria. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw
had the same sort of idea.
Yeah, I never saw Black Adam. I know a little bit about the character. I always thought it was weird that of all the DC heroes, he gets a movie just because.
Yeah,
I think it's on that. I think it's The Rock because he's like, who do I look like? It's like, well, you kind of look like Black Adam. It's like, okay,
okay, cool.
So I know it's on HBO, and I'll probably
I'll have to
put it in. I want to see Hawkman. That's the only reason I wanted to see it. I don't care about Black Adam. I don't have no interest in that.
For me,
that was worth it. For
Dr. Fate was the best.
Dr. Fate was cool. Oh man, I want to see it because of Dr. Fate.
Yeah, it's on HBO.
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan did a fantastic job.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
How could you not?
He was Bond.
Yeah, he was.
I'm into the whole long hair old guys.
I think strange enough, I think the one Bond always confused me with realistic. I think I remember as a kid used to be in the Bond movies till there was one scene, and I think it was Bronson, when he was actually sitting in the turret of a tank and driving it. And I'm like, well, that's just stupid.
You hold your tongue. GoldenEye is one of the best Bond movies ever made. In the scene when he drives,
wasn't he actually firing the cannon too?
He does. He fired it into the front of the train.
How was that even possible?
It inspired the greatest
to derail
video game.
the train, and the train. It actually doesn't derail it. It's very believable. It creates a lot of smoke. The train hits the tank. He escapes the tank in time for the train to hit it. It derails it, so he can go and fight Alec Trevelyan.
There could be nerd alert, and then there's just common sense. If somebody's sitting on top of a car and driving a car, you're not going to be like, well, I'm a nerd because I know how cars drive. No, I'm a nerd because I'm like, well, that's just stupid.
That movie starts with him rappelling down into a secret compound and getting shot at by about 500 Russian soldiers with AK-47s, and none of them hitting them. But you're upset he can drive a tank?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Speaking of
the idea that Aaron wants to have actual believability in a Bond.
Yeah, that's
what I'm saying is they go back and forth. When they started doing the Craig, the new guy, it made it more believable.
And planning.
And so they were unbelievable. Then they were believable. Then they're unbelievable. Make up your damn mind.
I'm with you because it's one of the worst ones.
It's more like the Batman thing. There's the Nolan verse. There's there's the Tim Burton verse.
Roger Moore.
You need nipples on the bat suit.
Do you really? No one needs
an AMC javelin and does a flip and lands it.
I'm not even going to go.
Die Another Day. One of the worst ones ever. Worse with it, they've got a holodeck. They have got an invisible car. Sorry, you're right. I'm with you.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
It's like they keep making it's like James or Sean Connery. Okay, we jumped the shark. Roger Moore. Okay, we jumped the shark.
We jumped the shark. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, James Bond.
I think we just jumped the shark.
Yeah, we did.
We really went off the rails.
We've got James Bond.
We've got shark down.
Star Trek, X-Men, Avengers.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, but James Bond is kind of a gray hero.
He is.
He is.
I think.
Yeah,
he'll be morally ambiguous.
He has a license to be gray, though.
That's great. We are Brent. Just to catch you up, we have been talking about the good, the bad, and the gray. So we sort of set the definitions and the distinctions between what makes a hero in the traditional sense, what makes a villain in the traditional sense, and now we're into our gray character discussion. Many of the observations brought us around to understand that relatability helps with a grayer character, along with just being more interesting and nuanced in terms of motivations, where not only can we relate to them, but maybe the antagonists and protagonists around the character can relate to them as well. Who would you consider like a gray character. We've already said things like Punisher.
We've already talked about Gandalf the Gray.
Yes. We did.
I was going to go with the Gray Panthers.
Yeah.
You know, I actually think if a character's not gray, you got to do something really spectacular to make them interesting at all.
Yes. Thank you, Brent.
That's what Barb says.
Like, here's the thing. Here's a great example.
Brent, don't be taking sides.
The Joker, you'd think, is as dark as they get. But think about The Dark Knight when he has his sit down with Harvey Dent in the hospital bed, and he says, all I do is I take their plans and I pull them all apart, and then he says,
you do a good Joker.
You know, what happened? You know, a couple of guys get killed, okay, but then you read about soldiers getting killed and everyone loses their minds, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly you're going, I think the Joker's starting to make sense. That's weird.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you're also realizing, okay, now suddenly I can care about him a little bit more. And then when he sets fire to the giant pile of money,
makes no sense.
He's saying, this is stupid. And you've always known in the back of your mind, he's right. If this is really what it's all about, then why are we doing this super villainy? And why don't we just go knock over some banks and call it good? And then you're like, okay, the Joker's making sense. Magneto, who is this horrible guy. Okay, but let's look at his background.
Also gray.
Concentration camp and his fear about another Holocaust. And suddenly he's starting to make sense. So it's almost like Captain America, not a spot of darkness in him. Okay, so what do we have to do to make him interesting? And what's funny is you have to start messing with everything around him to make it interesting. S.H.I.E.L.D. suddenly goes really bad. Suddenly Iron Man has turned against him. I mean, if it was just Captain America, you might start to get worried that people would get bored. He's just so righteous.
Yeah. Oh, that's why he's self-righteous. That's why I don't like him.
So, I don't know.
I just put it more directly. I said he had a stick up his ass.
You said, but we can't say the A word, Barb.
That's not what you said.
Last time we got kicked off,
is Hinder.
His derriere.
Derriere. I like that word.
Ryan says, Barb, how are you?
Barb. Hey, Barb, how are you?
Hi, Ryan.
Ryan also says, I prefer morally gray characters comics to simple goody two-shoe characters. We did cover that. Infrafan says, I agree with Aaron. It's the difference between Die Hard and Good Day to Die Hard.
Yes, I do agree with you.
Oh, yeah.
James Bond is morally gray. Morally
nice.
That was probably what drove Ditko out of the industry, his whole black, white, Mr. A. But, well, you know, possibly, but as we discussed early on in the broadcast, we were talking about the culture in which these characters were invented was a different culture than today's. Calculus says Joker is evil, but he refuses to work with Red Skull when he figured out he was a Nazi. Interesting. Okay.
We'll go up against the IRS.
What? Huh?
Joker.
Wow. So Roland says Thanos had the right idea. So we talked about
except for the gut bacteria is bothering.
Yeah. With people's digestive systems, he did not take that into account.
We were saying if he killed half of all living things, then that really upsets the ecosystem, the balance of biology, and it's just it makes a big mess. So as far as gray here, let's talk about the Punisher and Daredevil, because I think those are two interesting characters when they're together. Some might say, well, there's not a whole lot of difference. Some may say, well, in a way there is, because Daredevil tries to keep the no-kill clause going, if at all possible, where Punisher obviously has no problem with that. Yeah. Talk to me. Anyone want to chime in on Daredevil versus Punisher?
I don't know him that well.
The gray.
I don't know him that well either, but I have some.
Well, what I do know about him though is at least Daredevil on his morality pedestal that he's on You know, he's like, I won't kill people, but you know, I'll beat them to a pulp so they won't do bad again.
Right.
Well, that's I was going to say that's just war theory.
Mm-hmm.
And Daredevil's Catholic, so he would assume just war theory.
Don't blaspheme Cap like a.
Yeah, we've been rolling. I'm sorry.
Kat, listen, she's been blaspheming Cap all night, Roland.
Yeah.
Wait, why is she here? Kick her off.
Captain America. I can't believe you just said that.
So what about the Punisher? I mean, to me, the Punisher is really not even gray. He's dark.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
That is really
there's nothing holding him back.
No, there's not. But it's a very simplistic idea of just eliminate all the bad.
It's justice.
So he has no moral compass.
Actually,
right.
He does
justice without mercy is.
Yeah, there is none. I remember I don't really love Garth Ennis's writing, but there was a scene when he did the Punisher revamp before he went full on nasty in the Max series. But I remember he had just helped a woman and they were talking and she says, "Why do you do it? Why do you kill criminals?" And he says, "Because I hate them." And she says, "What? It's not what about justice?" And he's like, "No. I just hate him."
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
that's him.
Yeah.
At that point, there's no justice.
There's no end to that path. No happy ending.
Yeah. In a way, it's like we're just lucky he's on our side, kind of. Like,
is he really?
What if he'd taken a wrong turn and suddenly just felt that way about cops? Or
is he even still a vigilante?
Yeah.
Interesting. What was that, Roy? Say that again.
Say, is he even still a vigilante if he just keeps going?
Yeah, I think he's gone straight psychopath. He's, a vigilante at least.
It is disturbing.
Right, yeah.
A vigilante takes the law into his own hands.
You know what?
Isn't interested in the law. He just wants to kill them all.
Yeah, he just wants to kill them all. So there's no filter there. There are no scales of balance there.
Yeah.
Well, I think he is just like an exterminator.
Yeah, he is.
That's
maybe he just needs the dead dog from his girlfriend or wife to.
He just needs the love of a good woman.
Yeah. So
I'm bringing up John Wick because we cheered on John Wick because of that puppy scene. It's so egregious to us. It just grates on every nerve. And you just want to see him take out all the. And those guys really are sleazy. I mean, it's this sleazy gangster, gangsters from Russia and so on.
But is that different from the Punisher?
Yeah, I know. It's really no different from the Punisher. And yet, again, context is so important there. And
style.
Style. Yeah. And I think also part of it, too, is Keanu Reeves is just more empathetic than anyone who's ever played the Punisher.
I think the difference is the Punisher was never a villain. He was a Marine. And the original story, his family was killed and he took out the mafia. John Wick was a hitman for years.
Yeah.
He's just returning back to what he'd originally done. Yeah. So it's like crime solving, crime. So he's not morally a hero or anything. And the puppy thing was just a parody of the revenge story. I mean, the fact that this guy's killing all these people over a dog, even though it represents his wife and blah, blah, blah. It's still, it's the parody of that's why I've liked John Wick, because I've always seen it as a sort of tongue-in-cheek parody if they keep upping the stakes to the point where, it's ridiculous.
The first one really is the only one that works. And I think it does work because of what you described. Because if you remove the puppy scene as a motivation, it's just really a guy out killing dudes. And nobody cares at that point,
but John Wick it's interesting because they've flipped the script. The more the story goes on, the more the backstory you get.
Yeah.
Things happen
that didn't happen before. The movie is just one long bloodbath from beginning to end. Really.
Yeah. What Tarantino movie is it?
right.
Kill Bill was like that, just bloodbath.
Well, I think what is compelling about it too, from an action fan's point of view, is a tremendous respect for the stunt coordinators who became directors to make that film. That is one of the best.
Right.
It's one of the last
reels for an action director.
Right.
It's all physical. It's not entirely CG.
Yeah.
Those guys did. They directed. I think Chad directed Cap 2, right? So you have the same sensibility with action there. So again, an action demo reel, just like Avatar is mainly just a 3D demo reel, right? It's like, okay, look what we can do, y'all. What about the story? Isn't it Mutiny on the Bounty again? Isn't it Dances with Wolves again? Yeah, but we don't care. Look at the 3D, man. It's really cool.
Can't get behind that.
Yeah,
and it's just. It's a great 3D demo reel. I mean, the effects are fantastic.
Ooh,
But
the textures. Yeah. Boring.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the new Avatar movie, or just Avatar in general?
All of them.
Same thing. It's just Avatar. It's just, how many times can you do Dances with Wolves? Explain that to me.
Right. Exactly.
I just love Avatar. I love the Avatar series for the Marines. I think Cameron nails the Marine sensibility to a T. And the bad guy.
He did an Aliens.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. He just nails that sort of arrogant mentality perfectly. Cameron is also very good at character building. And the thing is people always rip on him because of it's Pocahontas in space or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, but he's also a solid storyteller. He's a solid storyteller, and he's very good at building tension. He always has been.
My big thing with him is he's always got to have a pillow-lipped girl in it.
Which one?
A pillow-lipped girl
in all of his movies.
Interesting.
Pillow-lipped.
Calculus says, like I said, Punisher is more of an anti-villain. He does decently good things for selfish reasons. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. So as we bring it here to a close shortly, what do you guys think is the future? Do we continue with the nuanced archetypes? Do we go into a place where everything is so nuanced that the archetypes almost disappear?
Well, I think our sense of good and bad has also changed, which is destroying the archetypes. More people are concerned about social justice and certain other things than morally good things like say religion, like Christianity or something to bring. So I think even in the stories that's reflecting that, I think our culture as a whole is starting to value different things that we consider things worth fighting for, and you've seen that reflected in the characters. Whether you make the characters gray or not is up to you, but I do think that there's a movement away from the black and white sensibility of, say, like the Ten Commandments, and more towards more of justice of the individual, which is going back to humanitarianism, in medieval times and stuff. The human is the center instead of stuff, and so that's flip-flopping. And it'll come around back to more of an archetypical black and white, but you see that reflected in the villains and heroes. And
there's scholars of history that claim, and this is supported by a lot of scholars, that everything is cyclical, right? So we go through these periods where the medieval idea of clear black and white broad brush that slowly degrades to relativism, slowly degrades to anarchy, collapse, then a rebirth, and
right. So we're going to more individual justice, like they were looking at in the 70s with the hippie movement, same sort of concept, and then we will go back, like in the 80s, more of a national. And you see nationalism rise up again as it did in the 80s when it came out of the Red Scare. Two national ideals fighting each other and stuff like that. My favorite great character
destroy the Earth before we can come back around again.
was always Kaneda and Tatsuo and Akira. They were my favorite gray characters when I was growing up, just because I always liked punks that had
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. But I always thought they were unique. And the Ninja Turtles originally were punks before they became
Winter Soldier.
Yeah. Yeah, Winter Soldier was okay. It was I just like the idea of these morally great characters that inadvertently do good without actually attempting to. I mean, Kaneda doesn't care if he destroys the world. He doesn't care. He just thought that his friend was, powerful enough to destroy the world, and he basically, like a punk, was like, you want to take me on? Well, then I got to come down and show this guy who's boss. And so it was a personal friendship that got in the way, but these two guys battling over their differences in their friendship is what ended up destroyed Tokyo, destroyed the world. But I always liked that he inadvertently did defeat Tatsuo, which was the plague that was destroying the world, but he didn't do it for you guys. He did it because the little punk had the audacity to, basically
defy him.
Right. Exactly. So
right. Well, that brings to mind one of my favorite characters, and you brought Cameron up earlier. I always loved Sarah Connor because Sarah Connor forged Sarah Connor to pronounce it accurately. Sarah Connor forged herself into a weapon. As the secondary result of her heroism was to save the world. The primary was to save herself, and it was like
to save her son. Save the world.
But I do like this. Now this is Scott Wakefield. I like the enduring.
Is it?
Good,
Who is this?
Hey, Scott Wakefield here.
Okay.
The enduring good versus evil. Now. It does not need to be, again, two-dimensional. We don't have to have a Captain America with no flaws and a villain with no good.
You're saying nuanced good.
Right. I want nuance. Lord of the Rings has many lines in it about darkness and the light coming through. And yes, I think those are enduring virtues that I will love to see in stories. Now, Aaron, you're talking about people's personal, beef. That's a great story. That's a great story. But through stories being told, good versus evil, my feeling, you can't go wrong. But it has to be nuanced. It has to be interesting. You have to have good details, good details, good characters,
context,
character driven, and I mean, Lord of the Rings is Frodo and Samwise and Gandalf versus just evil. That again, that villain's
Boromir, Faramir.
They didn't do anything with Sauron
between those two guys.
Sauron doesn't quite make sense.
He doesn't he's just kind of in the background, even though he's just.
But you can understand Gollum. You can understand Boromir. You can understand
that's good.
Real good. Scary good.
Scary.
Aragorn
I always thought
has his flaws.
The story of Sam was really part of the core, not just Frodo, but going from just a gardener to, escorting Frodo and literally watching Frodo succumb to the ring.
Yeah.
And,
do you guys think Sam would have succumbed to the ring?
No,
I don't
never.
think so.
No,
I don't think so. That's when he said I could share the burden. I was always like, I actually think this guy should have the ring because Frodo.
I know, right?
Give it to Sam.
I like to say Sam is the real hero, but I can see Frodo's side of it. But Sam is talk about
Sam is the hero of the piece.
Sam is the good guy,
the everyman. He's
the
everyman.
That's what
freaking gardener.
He's trying to do what's right. He sees that Gollum's causing problems, and his best friend Frodo tells him to take a hike, and it's so good.
I mean, you see Samwise as an allegory
this
too.
Huge spider, and wins.
Yeah.
You just see him as self as a soldier.
I won't take it theological.
Based on World War I, so I just always saw Sam as that sort of everyday guy.
That
in times of adversity and war, he just shines.
Steps up,
and we've had soldiers like that.
Yeah. I thought the screenwriter really did a great job summarizing that at the end of Two Towers when when Frodo asks in despair, "What are we fighting for?" and Sam says that there is some good in the world
that's worth fighting for. Yeah.
Oh, that's
that was the stand. To me, that's the emotional core.
Goosebumps.
Yeah, I think he did nail that in there.
I wish the movies. It's an epilogue of the Scouring of the Shire in the books. It's one of my absolute favorite parts of the books because it shows all of the hobbits grown, changed, and coming back to kick hinder. Pardon my language. In the movies, it's a weird thing to chop onto the end. So I get it. It made me a little sad that it wasn't there. But talk about characters and flaws and struggles. So good
talk about what you were saying in terms of nuanced good and evil, with the exception of Sauron being pretty broad brush. Yeah, unless you go into the Silmarillion and understand his background. But that's if you like to read encyclopedias. But honestly, though, those characters were very well conceived. The Fellowship themselves very well conceived for the film itself. But I think the future for comic book heroes, villains, and gray characters really, again, depends on our interest in how we write them. I think all of the characters we discussed tonight can continue if handled by the creative teams that make them worthy of our interest and make them compelling.
Comes down to the story.
Always comes down to the story.
It all comes back to a well-told story. You got to have a story for everything to happen with.
You got to have a story, and you got to have compelling characters too.
You got to care about them.
Divinity's got a lot of gray area in it because Zach is willing to do what it takes.
Yep. And so Barb, you don't want Zach to be a Captain America, a boring Captain America, right? Yeah, you want him to be.
That's why when people buy my book at shows and I say it's about an 11-year-old girl, oh, my daughter would love this. I'm like,
no.
Wait a
I
second.
gotta warn you first. This is PG. There is violence and blood in it. There's no sex, but there's violence and blood. So you need to read it first.
Oh, that's a good call. Speaking of Divinity, there's something you might want to talk about here at the close. Barb, you want to talk about what's happening?
Yep, we have a Kickstarter going on right now, and there are two amazing, that sounds very biased, but it is. Two amazing books that are on offer right now, and that's Roland Mann's Trumps, which is a brilliant take on a card game. He has taken a card game and turned it into an entire comics universe. And my book, Divinity, about a little girl with healing powers, and she's on the run from an evil cabal. It's the Kickstarter is live right now. There is so much amazing original art, including art from Ken Hooper, Mark Nelson, Alex Sarabia, Peter Clinton. There is just so much fantastic art. You guys would be crazy not to snap it up, including some of my inked pages. And sad to say that my original inking days are over. So if you're ever going to get some of my original art, you better step up and get it.
She's not making it anymore.
I'm doing it all digital.
Yeah, it's all virtual now.
20,
right?
Yeah, everything on the 22nd, I think.
Yep.
I think it wraps up on the 22nd.
I've switched to completely digital because of a tremor in my hand. So if you're going to get any of my original art, you better get it while it's still available.
So everybody, go to the Kickstarter. Get it now.
Limited.
Trump's Divinity. Go for it. And this is a great place for us to say our goodnights. And we always like to say our goodnights the same way. We always end our broadcasts with the phrase, make mine.
Good night. I'm Pat Broderick. Make mine Silverline.